Rachelle and I'm the clarinet professor here at Wichita State University. And on this video, I'm going to be playing this year's all-state audition music, Weber's Second Concerto, as well as giving you a few tips to help you as you prepare for your district and all-state auditions. If you have any additional questions or if you would like to schedule a lesson, please contact me at rachelle.goder@wichita.edu, and good luck at your auditions. First, I'll give you some tips for working on the first section of the Weber Concerto No. 2. The first section is the recitative. It says lento at the top, which means very slow. It also says ad libitum, or ad lib, at your liberty. So there's some freedom there. Weber wrote a lot of opera, and he tends to be very expressive in his writing. So you'll see all these different fermatas written, even on rests, where you're supposed to take a little more time. So we get to have a little fun with this section. Here's a little example. Take our time there. And you'll notice also there's a slur with staccatos under it. You are supposed to tongue those notes. They just are a little more connected than a normal staccato. Also, the agitato that you see at the end of the first line, it doesn't say to accelerate while we play, but traditionally that's what clarinet players will do when they perform this. So I like to think of it as something that's getting faster and louder, almost like you're chasing someone or someone's chasing you. And next, I'll talk about the infamous run after the maestoso, second line. At the end of that line, we have all of those 30-second notes. I would practice this going from beat to beat and treat them like 16th notes as you practice, like this. And so on. And you'll just speed that up as fast as you can for the audition. But make sure you don't go any faster than you can handle. Keep it clean. Next, right before the 6/8 time, you will notice on my recording that you'll hear next that I add a fermata on the low B, the second note of that measure. That was not written in this particular edition of this music, but it is in another edition, and it's just something that I personally like. Next, at the andante con moto, it's in 6/8 time. You will need to count this in 6, since it's a slow tempo. The dotted half notes will get 6 beats, and the dotted quarters will get 3, the quarters get 2, the eighths get 1. So basically you are doubling the value of everything. It's a fairly quick 6 tempo, about like this, but still you count it in 6. And next, the cadenza that is written about 4 bars from the end. It's just a string of notes and it says cadenza. A cadenza is a place where the clarinet is going to be playing by itself, and that again you have liberty, just like the ad libitum earlier, to play it faster or slower, etc. I like to divide this big bunch of notes into smaller groups. I like to think 2, 2, 2, and then 3. C is the first note, then you start counting 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. The very last comment I will give you for this excerpt is on the very last note when you have the A and it's tied. Please take care to count this out exactly. 12 counts. Thank you. give you some tips for practicing the second excerpt, the Palaka. This one is just a lot of fun. There's a lot of variety here. The rhythms are interesting, and I feel like you can hear Weber's sense of humor as you play this excerpt. The first piece of advice or tip that I would give you is that in the very first measure, where there's a rest, that you think eighth notes before you even begin playing. You think 1 and 2 and 3 and D, da, 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 da. That will help you to think those eighth notes. Second, on the syncopated rhythm in the second measure, which is where we begin, you might want to try playing the 2 eighth notes that equal the quarter note there in order to precisely play it and practice it. It would sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and... So you can play those subdivisions, and that will help you hear that when you play it as quarter notes. The next thing that I'd like to talk about has to do with the tonguing in general in this whole excerpt. I've heard a lot of people play this for me when they are preparing, and one of the issues that we end up working on is the tongue sounding too heavy, that you're using your tongue and pushing into the reed too hard. It's easy to think that that's what you're supposed to do when you look at the music and you notice there are accents and staccatos everywhere. But if we play it like that, it'll just sound too heavy. And I'm going to show you the example of how to do it wrong. I'm purposely tonguing about as hard as I can. Here's what we're going for. You'll notice that on the staccatos, I'm barely making them very short. I'm actually lengthening them so they can sound more beautiful and flowing. Also, in the last measure of the first line, there are a few different ways you can think about fingering this. If you finger the first note, the C, the regular way, the right-hand way, then when you play the high D, you'll probably want to take your E flat key off, okay? So it will still probably be in tune if you do it that way, and that's the way you'll hear me do it in the recording coming up next. Also, in general, you want to subdivide carefully anything in this entire movement that's more than an eighth note long. If you have a quarter note, subdivide 2 eighth notes. If you have the quarter note tied to the eighth note, subdivide 3 eighth notes. The low dotted quarter, 3 eighth notes. So for instance, if I was going to play those subdivisions, it would sound like this. You see what I mean by doing that, and that way you'll subdivide while you're playing it and performing it. Last, I will talk about that final passage where we play lots of C's over and over again, and a very bouncy rhythm, dotted rhythm, up to different notes all the way up. The way I would recommend practicing this would be to lengthen all of the notes that are changing. We have C happening over and over again. Lengthen the notes that change, like this. And so on, all the way up to the high C. And that tends to really help us. And then when we speed it up, it's so much easier. Thank you. some tips on how to practice the third and last excerpt. When you first look at this excerpt, I think it can look intimidating with all of the beams and black lines everywhere. But one thing you should notice is that everything on this section is based on a triplet. So instead of thinking the sextuplets, those groups of sixes, try practicing all of this in groups of 3 and go slowly. So you're going to think maybe the 8th note as the beat, and instead of 3/4 time, you're going to kind of think 6/8 time, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like this. That's how you should practice, nice and slow and even, and with your metronome. I'd like to point out that in the second measure, where you have the D flats, when you're coming down that run, you should play those with the right hand, down here, the right hand D flat, and the left hand C key. And then on the third beat of that measure, when it goes C, B flat, G, E, C, B flat, you're going to go to the right hand C at that time. Okay, and that may be something you're really not used to, so you'll have to practice that. I also would recommend that you keep a list of tempos that you've been working at, so when you come back to it each time that you practice, you know how fast you've worked it up to. Also, you have the high F occur 2 times in this movement and this excerpt, once at the end of the chromatic scale. If you may have learned from your private teacher or someone that high Fs are generally out of tune on the clarinet. They run flat. We have to do something about that. So we add the fork key, the sliver key, on the right hand and at the back of the key. So a high F without that sounds like, and runs flat. We want to add the fork. So I'm going to play it flat and then add the fork. So you can hear that it changes the pitch in a good way and higher. We do that on the very last note of this excerpt as well. There are 2 other things that I would like to tell you about. The third to the last line, when we play, I'd like for you to notice that at the end of each of those groups of 6 notes is an arpeggio, and it's an F major arpeggio. So some sort of combination of F-A-C, or when it's coming down, C-A-F. There's all that F major there. So you can take that apart and play those little pieces, and hopefully that will help you. Last, I will talk to you about the trill fingerings at the very end. We have a high C trill. The way we're going to want to trill that is the third side key up. If you count from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, that side key right there. So play high C and then trill that. That will give you a D. And then the low C is just like you would normally do it, C to D. And then the high E, you can do it 2 ways. You can do it with your pinky to go E to F, or you can do it with the bottom side key. Play E and then hit the bottom side key, which is a nice fast way to do that trill. And then you'll do your D, E, F, and you'll have to add the fork key again to make sure it's high enough. Good luck to you as you're working on your district and state auditions.